Hey, this is Sergey with Hypergrowth Engineering, and today I want to share with you a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It is that of the hypergrowth engineer. Now, we have the concept of a full stack engineer in engineering. It's a traditional term, it's a well understood term. It means an engineer who works on the database, the back end, and the front end. Now, that's perfectly well and good. It's important to have knowledge of the whole stack so you can deliver a product all the way through. Okay, but that does assume a few crucial things. So let's say you do engineer the product the perfect way, you get all the things right, but the business case is wrong. Oh, or perhaps you are working on the product and realize a little too late that that product isn't generating cash and the business really needs that cash. And perhaps the product that you engineered isn't going to be paying your paycheck. So usually that problem doesn't come up, except for a startup. So what's the difference between a startup and a large corporation? In a large corporation, there is a balance of cash. There's a measure of stability outside of the engineering department. So even your job can very well be scoped to just the engineering in a big enterprise, because all the other things are done by other people who are very good at their jobs. And as an engineer, you trust that those other people can make the best possible decision, at least a good enough decision, about their area of expertise without knowing the full context of the engineering bits. And that is actually a bit of a fallacy. It's hard to make the best possible decision without understanding the trade-offs that come from engineering. That's a good bit of that can be alleviated with some conversations between, product engineering, sales engineering, and that's really key. But in a small startup, what do you got? You got your small team. You got a limited budget. And that, I found, leads me to start questioning, well, what else is there in the company? Like, I see the qualification, I see the expertise, I see the competencies of my team members. And they cover a good bit of stuff that I am not particularly interested in doing. That's great. Like, I'm very happy that they cover it and they do it well. And yet I see other areas of the business where perhaps we got an opportunity there. Perhaps I can offer some perspective into another piece of the process that we haven't covered yet, that perhaps we don't have the competencies on our team for. So when we're looking at a whole startup, we've got a range of skill sets that are really useful. At the core, it's build and sell. Can you build it and can you sell it? As an engineer, you or I am looking at how can I build the product the best way. Now, the problem becomes when the best way, how do we categorize that? Like, a trouble that I've occasionally find, a constant dilemma in my head is, are we doing the right thing? Because I'm conscious of the money that we're spending. I'm conscious that, hey, we don't have an infinite runway. Time is limited. Are we using our time to our best possible advantage? Does my time spent working on this particular story or ticket or this particular bug actually get us to increase our cash flow? Does that actually increase the likelihood that we might get a next round of funding, or get a get another exit. Like, is there a way that it's going to increase the cash flow, make the business sustainable? Like, all these aspects are things that aren't covered when you're just building. Like, it ends up being that, what is the alignment? What is the alignment between the work that is getting done on the ground level with the eventual outcomes of the business? If there's a vision for how the business is going to turn out, what the steps incremental are to get to that future, amazing. But oftentimes there's not. So what do you do? There's a concept of emotional labor that has gone around the internet for a while, and that kind of gets to some of the work that women often do on teams. Men do it too, but there's a certain amount of social acuity, a certain amount of understanding what's going on in the team, like all together, and managing personalities, communicating with people, and bridging misunderstandings, bridging the gaps, and helping to find a cohesive aspect to the team. Now, let's say, like, and that aligns the team. That helps to align everyone on the team moving in little different directions to coalesce around, hey, we're going in kind of this general direction. And that's good enough. That's important. We don't want everyone going in all different sorts of directions, because then we don't make directed progress towards the thing that we are building. We're not making directed progress towards the end goal of the company, or the progressive goal of the company. So back to, what do we do when we don't have a clear vision? We don't have a clear set of steps on how to get to where we aim to go. And actually, this is completely realistic. Of course, you're not going to have every single step. Like, that's why we set a vision, and we figure it out. We're like, okay, well, how can we get closer to that? How can we increase our cash flow? How can we get more customers? How can we help the customers, help our users have a better experience on the site, better experience with our product? How can we help our customers to realize the value that they're getting and pay us some money for it? That tends to be a useful question to ask. It's like, well, how are we getting some revenue? So the whole team really ends up being involved in the figuring out of the next steps. What's different with a startup from a traditional enterprise is that a big enterprise, a large company, may have the vision kind of tier by tier by tier of management, all the way down to you at 8 levels down, 8 managers down, and okay, you get the vision, or you get the direction that the company's moving, and there's a set product plan, and we're executing on it because that's the product plan. Often you have a bit of flexibility there in talking with your manager, especially if you are a more empowered team, let's say. But there's not a whole lot of leeway. There's the scope of possibility, the scope of things that generally flow down the pipe are pretty set. And for better or for worse, that gives stability. And stability, different people have different risk tolerance. The amount of stability that an enterprise offers, the fact that you're not running out of cash, you're not going to miss out on your next paycheck, you're not going to have to worry about what the future of the company is a year or two down the line, much less 6 months. You can rest easy knowing that you can it's not that you can more or less coast, but let's be honest, especially in the past 5 years. But back to vision. Let's say you're at a startup. The vision isn't clearly articulated, may not be clearly articulated yet, especially in the very early stages when you're still figuring it out. And by you are still figuring it out, I do mean you. It ends up being a piece of work that every owner of the company, every person who acts like an owner of the company with the long-term interests of the company in mind starts to think about. What is the vision? Okay, maybe let's say we have a goal. Awesome. Well, how do we get there? Well, okay, so we gotta build something. Really, what are we building? Well, you gotta figure that out. Are we building a widget? A feature? Are we pursuing this market or that market? What are their pain points? Oh wait, we're in product land. What are the demographics of our customers? What keeps them awake at night? Who has tried to sell them a similar product before? Oh wait, now we're in sales land. Well, aren't those things kind of important for figuring out what you're going to be building? Yeah. So now we're coming into the realization that, hey, all this stuff is interconnected. There's a lot of functions within a company that need to interact in order to work together, in order to bring the whole team closer to achieving its goal. Now there's a concept where the more people you have, the more relationships you have to manage. There's the Dunbar number of a rough 150 people that a person can keep track of in their head. And that tends to be from tribal times where you could recognize the relationships and of a group about 150 people large. Past that, you start forgetting. Past that, it becomes less cohesive. Now, our team is obviously, your engineering team is obviously not 150 people large. That would be your whole life. But it likely is, it could be 3 people, it could be 7 people, it could be 10 people. It could be, the broader engineering organization could be 100 people large. But you don't keep track of them. In my experience, I look at just the team I'm working with and any other people that are on the project I'm on. So that may be a product person, that may be someone in sales, that may be a designer. By the way, designing, another skill set that does it look pretty? Is the user experience smooth? Does it flow well? Does it match? Does the user experience match what the customer expects, what the existing process in the customer's mind is for how that product should work? Or is it easy to understand how that product works? For the customer, not for you who built it, not for the designer who designed it, not for the product person who figured out, hey, here's what the features we want, but for the user. Does the user understand intuitively how that product is supposed to work? So an eye for design. I've definitely heard people wanting, can we have a front-end engineer who also does design? Can they also do UX? And truth is, those people are hard to come by. Just like full stack engineers, somewhat hard to come by. Just like deep expertise in a topic, somewhat hard to come by. Still, very valuable skills. All of them. We just have to consider what's the cost of having every single type of expert on a team. What's the cost of supporting and maintaining a team of 10 people? And that's on the small scale, 100 people. There's a fun metric, there's a fun factoid I remember, that when Instagram got bought by Facebook, they had something like 19 engineers. Or sorry, not 19 engineers, 19 people in the company. 19. And now they're reaching what, like billions of people in their customers and their users? Gee. When I look at that, I think, well, wait a second. That's a small team. That's a small team. Like, that's not a whole lot of relationships to manage. That's not a whole lot of alignment that they need to do. There's 19 people, and probably that startup is pretty close to their life. And they're just like zeroed in on, hey, we're making, like, we know what the core feedback loop of the product is. We know what the core user acquisition strategy is. And let's engineer this thing, let's build this thing, let's design this thing such that we maximize those metrics. That's an ads model. The more attention that that product got, the more money that the Instagram would make. Same with Facebook. Now, for an ads model, more attention, more time on screen is great. It's a great metric. It's one that's somewhat easier to build towards. Okay, like what gets more attention on screen? But for other types of products, like traditional SaaS, traditional software as a service companies, products. Like, what do we do with those? Sometimes it's a seats model. Sometimes you're aiming to get folks on the platform. You're aiming to get many users to use your product. Great. Sometimes there's a usage-based model where the more use of your product that a company has, then the more they pay for it. And sometimes there are other models. I'm not going to get into them, but just to touch on, oh wait, there's pricing. Might pricing impact how we do engineering? Quite possibly. I know for me it did. I was like, oh boy, like how do we think about this product? Like, if we're maximizing for this metric, the function that performs that metric better be darn efficient. At least efficient enough. Like that piece of code better be pretty clean so that when we're modifying it next, we're not going to end up running into and creating a whole bunch of bugs. So let's come back to the concept of this full stack engineer, and related to a hypergrowth engineer. When we're looking at the number of connections, the number of relationships that a company has to manage, that the people inside of a business have to manage, that creates additional work. That alignment, the emotional labor of aligning people together to follow the same vision, to do work that's aligned in the same direction and independently, not just like top down. We want people to use their own judgment, use their own faculties and expertise and insights to scale the company, to create a product that users love and will pay for. The more people, the more individual experts, the more silos of information, the more communication that has to occur in order to reach optimal decisions. So this is the case for a generalist, especially in the early stages of a company. The hypergrowth engineer is a generalist across multiple spheres of what enables a company to succeed. I'm not saying that an engineer has to be an expert in sales, marketing, product, engineering, design. No. But they better be damn well familiar with them. Because when there is a short number of people who are responsible for the company, and there's a small number of folks who are making decisions, who are charting the course for where the company is going and how, it's useful to have all that context in one head, at the very least in a few heads. Like, there's a lot to be said for let's talk it out, let's brainstorm, let's use everyone's individual knowledge and expertise to inform the problems that we're solving and how we're going about solving them. Yes. And sometimes you need a direction to stick with it. Sometimes that processing happens inside of one or two heads. Sometimes having a second pair of eyes, a second brain on a subject, you may have, as an engineer, as a hypergrowth engineer, you might be the one who is fairly expert at your craft of engineering, but an apprentice in design, maybe an apprentice in sales, and a complete novice in marketing. And that's okay. Because you might have someone else who is a expert in sales, a journeyman in product, and a novice in engineering. You might have another archetype that might be someone who's expert in product, a journeyman in design, and maybe like a journeyman in marketing. Cool. Writing sales copy. Cool. You see this starting to overlap as you talk with and interact with different roles, people in different roles. As you start getting curious around, what makes that role work? Like, what is the stuff that they're considering when they're making their decisions that end up affecting me, that end up affecting the engineering department, not a startup, the engineering team. Curious because I like us having a sense of agency, right? I like being able to chart my own course because I figure with sufficient expertise in a engineering discipline, perhaps I can help problem solve some things that others don't have time to. And this is kind of similar for everyone across the team. Everyone has their unique capabilities of problem solving. What problems are they able to solve and well? What problems can they contribute to? So again, agency. Where are we? What are we looking for there? How can a person on a team have high confidence that the decisions that they're making are positively impacting the future of the company? How, with high confidence? Never mind that a startup is highly, a startup may have a clear direction. Here's where we're aiming, but a lot of variables are not set in stone. There's some turmoil. Speaking from experience, there's some turmoil. And that's expected and necessary sometimes. So given that you have a direction and you have a skill set, you have kind of the core functionality, the core role that you're playing in the team. Let's say that's engineering, hypergrowth engineering. Remember, this grows. Like, how do you grow a company at scale? How do you grow a profitable company at scale? Coming down back to agency, the individual agency of each person to make great decisions and have high confidence, medium to high confidence, that is aligned with the future of the company. That's a yes and alongside what has already happened. That's understanding the full context of the company that you're at, the full context of the product, of the sales approach, of the customers, of the users. All in your head. Or at least most of it. At least the relevant parts. Hopefully you're not missing anything. And from there, using that context, using that set of information about the company, about the history, about the shared understanding within the company, to go and make your engineering decisions, to figure out, oh, what tickets should we work on? What's the feature that's most likely to move us forward? And what things can we cut out of that feature? Like how much, like what is the minimum viable feature there? There's the minimum viable product. What can be a prototype and what do we know for sure? What do we work on now or what do we defer to later? What's going to make a measurable difference now and what's going to be the infrastructure that supports the company 6 months, 6 years from now? Or is that just all going to get rewritten? How much of all of that is something that you need to keep track of? Now, if you're on the path of a hypergrowth engineer, you start looking at it, and you start realizing that if you're going to act like an owner of a company, if you're going to be an owner of a company and have impact, have a measurable effect on your future outcomes, if you want to have your agency be warranted, like why would people trust you to make the right decisions in that context? Do you understand their position? Do you understand other things about the company that you can make a reasoned argument about how this is going to be in the best interest of the company and the users in the future? You gotta think about it. So if you're on that path to being a hypergrowth engineer, you start acting like an owner of the company, so that eventually you are an owner of a company, so that you build high credibility as an expert in your field and as a really solid contributor in this broad skill set that's necessary in a startup. You become more than a generalist within the software space. You become more than just a generalist of engineering. You become a generalist of business, of the making of money, of the crafting, the building, the scaling of a business, the building of the systems that support a business, of building out something from nothing, of going, I hate to use 0 to 1 because some businesses are very much 1 to N, but going from 0 to 1. All of that put together, the minute, tiny details to understand the different aspects of the company, to bring them together, and to inform those decisions, become a credible author of the decisions of a company. That is a hypergrowth engineer. Cool. Thank you for listening. Super appreciate you. Hope you found this insightful. And let me know if you got any questions. If you're on the journey to be a hypergrowth engineer. And I look forward to sharing this path with you. To sharing some stories, sharing some insights, and moving forward together. Peace out.